Okay, let's jump right into it and talk about the absolute most sweat-inducing part of any job hunt, the behavioral interview. Welcome to this explainer. Look, we all know the drill. You've cleared the initial resume screening, you totally crushed the technical round, and you are feeling really good about your chances. You're practically at the finish line. But then comes the part that makes even the most highly qualified, confident candidates second-guess absolutely everything.
Picture this. You're sitting there, hands are maybe getting a little sweaty. The interviewer looks up from their notes, locks eyes with you, and drops this anxiety-inducing question right into your lap. Give me an example of a time you failed. Yikes. Or maybe it's, tell me about a time you faced a challenge, or the absolute classic trap. Describe a situation where you had to work with a difficult team member.
And boom, your brain just goes totally blank. It's the worst feeling, right? Despite having awesome internships, impressive side hustles, or running massive campus clubs, you just freeze. You start rambling, trying to find a point, and you inevitably leave that room wishing you had said that one perfect thing you thought of exactly 5 minutes too late in the elevator. But here's the real secret. Behavioral interviews aren't actually about the raw data of your experience. They are entirely about how you frame that experience.
So in today's explainer, we're going to walk through a completely foolproof playbook to eliminate that panic for good. We'll hit 1, the Gen Z advantage, 2, the STAR method, 3, real-life examples, 4, the interview cheat code, and wrap up with 5, your 3-step practice guide. Let's get into it.
Starting right off with Section 1, the Gen Z advantage. We're going to see exactly why your non-traditional experience is actually a total superpower.
Because let's be honest, there's a massive disconnect happening right now. Most interview advice out there inherently assumes you've been sitting in a corporate cubicle for a decade, managing traditional workflows. But your reality, it's so much more dynamic than that. You've got internships, you've launched freelance projects, you run complex student clubs, or maybe you've navigated the chaotic shifts of remote work firsthand. Listen to me, you do not need a 10-year corporate job to have a great story. Your campus clubs, your gigs, your volunteer work, it's all completely valid. You just have to structure it correctly to show off the exact skills they're looking for.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, the STAR method explained. This is basically the ultimate storytelling framework.
You might have heard of it before, but the STAR method is a literal game changer. It stands for situation, task, action, and result. Interviewers absolutely love this method. Actually, they rely on it. Keep in mind, they're talking to dozens of people. Their brains are tired, and they just want to be able to score you easily. This framework forces you to be concise and incredibly easy to evaluate, giving them exactly what they need without having to dig through a messy, winding story. So, the trick is to walk through these 4 steps methodically. First, the situation. Just set the scene, literally 1 or 2 sentences max. Give the context and move on. Next, the task. What was your specific job in that mess? This shows you own the problem. Then we hit the action. What did you actually do? And hey, use I statements here. Don't say, we did this. Show your specific thought process and the exact steps you personally took. And finally, the result. What happened? Bring in some numbers if you can, and always highlight what you learned.
Now look at this breakdown, because this is where people mess up. See that massive 60% chunk dedicated entirely to the action? Spending the vast majority of your time right there is the secret to avoiding the biggest interview trap ever, over-explaining the backstory. People waste so much time rambling about the drama of the situation, but the interviewer really just wants to know how you solved it. That's your action. The rest is just setup and payoff.
All right, Section 3, real-life STAR examples. Let's actually apply this framework to some real Gen Z experiences.
Here's a super common, broad question you're basically guaranteed to get. Tell me about a time you faced a challenge at work. Let's build a brilliant answer using a typical internship.
Okay, imagine you're interning at a media company. Situation: the main editor goes on emergency leave right before a huge deadline. The task: you are now responsible for finishing this client promotional video on time. Now, the action: you don't panic, you look up crash course tutorials to learn the software features you're missing, you prioritize the critical sections first, and you work late to get a rough cut out 24 hours early. This shows incredible initiative. Finally, the result: the client loves the rough cut, approves it, and actually asks for another video for next quarter. Notice how those action points, hustling through tutorials and prioritizing, prove your resourcefulness without needing a fancy VP title. It shows you can figure things out when the pressure is on.
But what about interpersonal conflict? Oh yeah, the classic trap. Tell me about a time you had to work with a difficult person. It is so easy to accidentally sound bitter or difficult yourself here. Let's use a side hustle to nail this one.
Situation, you run a freelance social media gig, and a client constantly changes their requirements at the absolute last minute. Task, manage the relationship and deliver the work without completely burning out. Action, instead of getting mad, you hop on a call. You realize they just don't know what they want, so you create a super simple one-page intake template for them. You then politely but firmly set a strict boundary that changes are only accepted up to 2 days before posting. Result, the chaos completely stops. The client loves the new structure, stays for 6 months, and even refers 2 other businesses to you. To an interviewer, this proves you don't just complain about people, you engineer professional boundaries to manage them. Absolute gold.
And then we get to the big boss of questions, leadership. Tell me about a time you showed leadership. You're probably thinking, I've never been a manager. Totally fine. Let's solve this with a standard college project. Situation, you're heading a student club putting on a festival for 500 people, and 3 weeks out, your main venue unexpectedly cancels. Total nightmare. Task, find a new venue within budget in exactly 1 week. Action, you keep the team calm. You divide everyone into 3 targeted search groups to cover ground fast, and you decide to personally handle the heavy lifting of the vendor negotiations. Result? It works. You secure an even better, more intimate campus venue, redesign the layout, and the event draws 550 attendees. I gotta tell you, keeping a team from melting down and saving a 500-person event, that is just as valid a leadership test as running a corporate board meeting. It's flawless crisis management.
Moving on to Section 4, the interview cheat code. Let's map out the 7 questions you absolutely must prepare for.
Honestly, I highly recommend you just pause the explainer right here and take a screenshot. This is literally your study guide. It perfectly maps the 7 universal questions you're going to face against your own personal story types. Whether they ask about failing, adapting to a sudden change, or using hard data to solve a complex problem, you can map each of these right to an academic setback or a last-minute pivot in a club. Pro tip, try to have at least 2 examples ready for each category. Maybe one from a formal internship and one from a side hustle. That way you have an arsenal to choose from, depending on the vibe of the room.
Finally, let's bring it all home with Section 5, your 3-step practice guide. Let's turn all this theory into actual confidence. Just follow these 3 steps. Step 1, brainstorm. Grab a blank doc, list out 10 to 15 experiences from anywhere in your life, and circle your strongest 5 to 7 stories. Step 2, convert them to the STAR format. Write them down, make sure that action section is the star of the show, and dig up real numbers for your results. Step 3, practice out loud, and I mean literally out loud. Record yourself on your phone or make a friend role play with you. Saying it out loud hits totally differently than just thinking it. Just remember, you're memorizing a flexible structure, not a rigid script. You want to sound natural so you can adapt the details on the fly.
Look, armed with this STAR method and your totally unique background, you can handle absolutely anything they throw at you. You can turn any messy, non-traditional experience into a super compelling narrative that proves you're exactly who they need to hire. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. What is the absolute toughest behavioral question you've ever faced? And using this new cheat code, exactly how are you going to crush it next time?